Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, this is the World View, and now just to tell us more on some developing story in Uganda, we're now joined live by Kampala reporter Solomon Serawinja there, who is, I believe, has the opposition leader Kizza Besigye with him there. Now, good to see you, Solomon. Good morning. And we're getting reports that the government has refuted reports that it has published that constitutional amendment bill to lift presidential age limit, which is currently at 75. How factual is that?
Well, a very good morning to you, Yusuf. The latest development to this story is that the Deputy Attorney General, Mwesigwa Rukutana, yesterday briefed Parliament that there are no efforts to amend Article 102B of the Constitution that limits the requirements that a person can only stand for presidency when he is below 75 years. Yesterday, the Speaker of Parliament, Rebecca Kadaga, put him to task to explain to the August Assembly whether this was true. Nevertheless, political commentators and indeed a large section of politicians in the country are looking at another avenue that they think government is trying to amend the Constitution much more to lift the presidential age limit, which means that the president can be able to stand in 2021 if the Constitution is amended to remove age limit from the Constitution. Just to help us put in perspective is Dr. Kizza Besigye, a strong opposition leader here in Uganda, also former presidential candidate in the Ugandan elections. Dr. Kizza Besigye joins us on World View this morning. A very good morning to you, Doctor. You've been vehemently against the Museveni regime, speaking of which you insist that he lost elections several times, and yet it comes back again, Doctor, that there are allegations that the Constitution could be changed to lift the presidential age limit from our very own books of law, Doctor.
Yeah, well, I think to understand this whole question of Constitution and how it is changed, one needs to, first of all, ask who is making the Constitution. And the simple answer is that the people who have power make a Constitution. In other words, Constitution, you cannot make a Constitution if you have no power. It is made by those who have power, and it serves those who have power. If the people, ordinary people, have power, they will make a Constitution and it serves them. If power is held by a clique of people, then the Constitution is made by that clique and it serves them. And regrettably, what we have in Uganda, and indeed in most parts of Africa, power does not reside in the people. And this is historical. First of all, our countries were not created by our people. Our countries were created by force coming from outside our communities. The British, in the case of Kenya and Uganda, created Kenya, created Uganda. Not the Kenyans or Ugandans. The laws that governed Kenya were made by the British, not by Kenyans. What happened at independence is that the British relinquished control or power, direct control of the countries, but what they used to control those countries remained in place, which was force. So our countries are, to a large measure, slightly different in Kenya now, but certainly pretty much the same in Uganda, is controlled by those who control force. That is why, in the case of Uganda, no leader has ever handed over power peacefully to another. Because power is with those who have force, and those who have sought it have resorted to force to also acquire it. So every change of leadership in Uganda has been mediated by force. Now, the Constitution similarly has been shifting according to who has the force. The Independence Constitution was made with the mediation of the British. The independence government of 1962 then overthrew that constitution, using force, overthrew the constitution, overthrew the institutions that were left by the British and created new institutions, created a new constitution, and continued to control. What is uniform is control of resources, which is what had brought the British here. Our resources were controlled by the British. Our resources are controlled by those who have guns. And unless that changes, the constitution continues to be dictated by those who have guns. And that is why in Uganda, this whole question of shifting constitution to what favors Museveni. In 2005, it was only one Ugandan in the whole country who was not allowed to contest again if the constitution had not been amended. Yeah. He was the only one affected by term limits. They had to go.
And they went, actually, I remember.
Absolutely, because it is him who has power. It is therefore him who makes the constitution. Age limits will go as long as he has the power. And that is why my call in all this is that we must therefore talk about people reasserting themselves. We must stop being subjects of those who have guns to regain our citizenship.
Doctor, let me pause you a little bit there, because I know that members of parliament are elected by the people, and that means they have the people's mandate. But when they come to parliament, I mean, we've had several members of parliament who have come out to say that they regret lifting term limits, apologizing to their electorates. It feels like when members of parliament come to the house, they sort of blind themselves to the ideas of the people, and then it becomes party activities. On that note, therefore, do you think that this parliament can stand the test of time on this age limit if it comes on the floor of the House?
No, it can't. It can't. Because, as I have told you, whoever has power over institutions. Because institutions use delegated power. Parliament uses delegated power. If people had power, then the power of Parliament would be power delegated from the people. And therefore Parliament would serve the people. People don't have power. The power that Parliament has is delegated to it by Mr. Museveni. That's why Parliament must serve him. It's a rubber stamp. And you've seen it when there was a debate here about oil. You saw what Mr. Museveni said. You know, if you don't listen to what we are saying, we shall remove you. And it was not only him. The commander of the forces, the late Aronda, told the parliament the same. Don't take yourself seriously. The Minister of Defense then, the Honorable Crispus Kionga, said the same. So, when they have made resolutions, Parliament has made some resolutions, and the next day they are loaded in buses and taken to a political school where they are dressed in army uniform and made to run around. You've seen it yourself. So Parliament cannot be a representative of the people of Uganda. It's a representative of who wields power. Who wields power is not the people of Uganda, it is Mr. Museveni and his guns. And the constitution will not be a constitution of the people of Uganda. It will not work for the people of Uganda as long as the people of Uganda have not reasserted themselves to take the country back into their hands.
When the president is asked whether he will stand, on several occasions we've asked him, and his reply has been, I will follow the constitution. And that feeds into the narrative of changing the constitution to fit his argument. So
you see, your interpretation of what happens, what he says, what goes on in the institutions becomes simple if you just say follow where the power is. As long as the power is Museveni and he's saying I will follow the constitution, and the constitution comes from power, it means I will decide what is in the constitution. And let me tell you, dictators, and not just dictators, power is not conferred on people. Power is acquired. The people of Kenya have struggled. They are still struggling, but they have struggled, and they have created certain things to change. And I really respect the people of Kenya in the struggle they have had. Even recently, they have achieved some important constitutional change where votes are going to be tallied in the district. I think at the constituency for the president. Those are changes that the incumbents would never have wanted, but because now institutions in Kenya are beginning to serve the people, whether the incumbents want it, it can be done as long as that's what people want.
Well, the poll question is on KTN Worldview is that should we, for example, lift age limits for African presidents? We've seen African presidents changing the constitution to fit in their favor. What is happening in Uganda seem to paint a bigger picture for the African continent for leaders who want to stay in power?
You see, if there was an established, entrenched democratic system, in which case what people will happens, there would be no need to have all these limitations in the constitution. Because if people are fed up with you, they would vote you out. If people want you, whether you are aged or very young, they would vote you in. The trouble that we are dealing with now is having mechanisms that can assist the development of a democratic culture. And because power that is exercised, we have inherent, all our people, those who are in power, those who are not out of power, their culture is not that respects others. And as long as we are not yet an established democracy, these mechanisms are helpful tools to limit and avoid the abuse of power for people to stay in office when people don't want them to stay.
My last question, what are you going to do as a leader, as someone who calls the shots in this country, if this age limit clause is amended in the constitution, or if it comes up on the floor of parliament?
Our struggle is not dependent on whether it is amended or not. As I have told you, our struggle is to have the country firmly back in the hands of Ugandans. I have told you, Mr. Museveni, we defeated in elections flat and square last year. He's in office because of guns, not because people willed for him to be there. That's why he locked me up illegally, and we have a court ruling to show that I was in illegal detention. From the day after we voted, I was in illegal detention. I could not even go to court. So the question here is not about what they will do with the constitution. They will change it if we have not regained our ability to stop them. That struggle will not stop until the people of Uganda regain control of this country and exercise their freedoms as God wills it.
Dr. Kizza Besigye, thank you so much for sharing your views with us this morning. Well, Dr. Kizza Besigye is a key opposition figure here in Uganda who calls the shots. He's also a former presidential candidate in this country more than 2 times. All right, we'll come back to you, Yusuf, for more of this morning's world headlining stories.
Many thanks, Solomon, for that. That was a reporter there having that exclusive interview with Dr. Kizza Besigye. And Besigye seems a bit pessimistic. He believes that that bill will sail through Parliament anyway. And this despite the government refuting that claim that they had published, that a particular constitutional amendment bill that is set to lift the presidential age limit in Uganda that is currently set at the age of 75. John, once more, your final comment on this. Are we seeing a situation where Uganda might head the Zimbabwe way?
Yes, Yusuf. It's almost certain that the Ugandan system is confusing, or rather using, the age limit and term limits when it suits itself. And as
you're referring to Museveni now.
Yes, let's put it this way. In Tanzania, for example, CCM has been in power for all those years. But remember, the presidents have, after 2 terms, exited. In South Africa, ANC has been in power since 1984, but we've had presidents exited. There are term limits. Now, in Uganda, they are playing between term limits and age limits. And as perhaps the opposition leader is saying, it's been used to confuse rather, and to use it when and how it suits
all
those
this,
in
of course,
power.
John, is meant to make Museveni the president up until maybe 2021 there.
Or until God knows when.
Thank you very much, John, for your input. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but of course, that is a developing story that we're still keeping a keen eye out for you. But now, Trix Ngando is here in studio with me, and she's on standby with Wild Press. Trix, what do you have for us? Good morning, first of all.
Good morning,
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So we have a lot as usual. That controversy regarding the emails sent between a Russian lawyer and Donald Trump's son is making headlines on very many Western papers. So we're going to take a look at some of them, and also in Uganda, some controversial, not political news from a pastor who had actually decided to ban Bibles, and this landed him in some hot soup. But we start off with the African News website that's telling us about the sentiments of Emmanuel Macron, who seems to think that giving birth by women of 7 children is overpopulating Africa, and this is the main problem. Well, this has caused him a lot of backlash online, because some people feel that while it is a huge achievement to be a president at his age, his sentiments on Africa are unfounded and not well informed, and therefore there had a lot of harsh words for that new French president. So take a look at that story. It's been huge since yesterday. Then there's more from Uganda, whereby musician Baby Cole did take that political seat in Uganda. So he was running for a parliamentary seat and won, and of course he's going to be sworn in. Then a female journalist has been sentenced from obstructing Sudanese security. And you know, there's a similar stories that come from Sudan, and also we have similar stories in Ethiopia, whereby journalists do not feel free to express themselves, and this has landed this journalist, as you have read right there, in some hot soup. Then we have Al Jazeera telling us more on what's developing in Qatar. So the latest on that front with regards to the United States is that Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State of the United States, has headed to Saudi Arabia, and therefore they were discussing the Gulf crisis. So we know that the United States having some oil interests, business interests in the Gulf nations for dialogue and not this kinds of diplomatic spats, because they have their own interests to secure. So the latest on that front is that he has signed an agreement with Qatar to fight terrorism. We know that one of the major accusations against Qatar was that they were facilitating terrorist group, and these countries wanted that country to cut links with some of those countries, some of those groups that seem to be Islamic extremists. So that's what's happening on the Gulf front. Take a look at that Al Jazeera website. That gives us more on what's happening in the Middle East in terms of all the facets that make headlines. That's all for World Press today. Back to you, Yusuf.
Many thanks, Trix, for that. We're almost out of time. Let me just go through some of your comments here. And we did ask you, do you think Africa should do away with presidential age limits? And Baba Sonia says, in France, one is not allowed to be a team coach if 65 plus years. What exactly went wrong in Africa? And then Omar Bon says, no, let Mugabe be Africa's last dinosaur. And then another one here, Alan Omondi says, age limits gives space to nurture new leaders. But when the same old guys keep presiding, we will never be dynamic. And one last comment here from Basho. Basho says the service term limit, not age. Kibaki Raila did the best, rather, more than the duos calling themselves digital. He has brought us back to the Kenyan political scene. Remember, we're also preparing for our own general elections in 26 days. And that is all we had for you on World View. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. Many thanks for watching. Bye-bye, and enjoy, of course, the rest of your day.